Okay, so one of my last videos there, I was talking about using propane instead of acetylene. The main reason for that is cost, and I'll go into that later on. And there are some things that change in with acetylene and propane. One of those being the different attachments that are used on the torches, whether it be a rosebud or a cutting tip or whatever. And I've already talked about regulators. I'm not going to go into fuel gas regulators at the moment. And, you know, of course, obviously there's trade offs to both, well, to everything, but there's trade offs between acetylene and propane. The cool thing with acetylene is that it is extremely easy to ignite. It needs very little heat to ignite. So if, like, you know, you're bending a piece of steel with a rosebud, and the steel's really hot and you go to shut the torch off and you want to relight the torch again, if the steel's hot enough, you can just hold the end of the rosebud up against the steel with acetylene and it'll light off. Propane's harder to ignite, and in my experience, that doesn't work. Like, even if the steel is just glowing red, propane still won't ignite. These little lightning bug deals that are a little sparker work fantastic on acetylene. In my experience, they don't work with propane. So there's some things that change. And in the cutting tips, anyways, you can get all sorts of different cutting tips for all sorts of different shit. The standard, if you will, acetylene cutting tip is a single piece cutting tip. And if you look at the holes on the end of it, the holes are completely flush with the end of the cutting tip. This one so happens to be a number 2 Victor, but these are single piece copper cutting tips. This one here is a number 3 Victor propane tip. And if you look at the end of it, it is recessed and is actually a 2-piece. So it's got a copper cone, if you will, on the outside, and then the spine is brass. And instead of having little holes, come on, it has got veins, if you will, cut into the side of it. So that makes it very easy to distinguish between the cutting tips, so that you don't mix them up. And you can use a acetylene cutting tip with propane, and have it be safe. The problem is that the problem is that propane wants to jump off of a acetylene cutting tip. It is not safe to use acetylene with propane attachments because the acetylene flame wants to run back into the attachment. And so that's the reason for the difference between these here. I don't have a single piece copper propane tip, but my understanding is that they are like the scarfing tips. How the scarfing tips have the recessed oxygen jet in the center. I guess the single piece propane dudes have the preheat holes recessed. But yeah. So, anyways, different tips. Propane will work in a acetylene tip. Acetylene does not work in a propane tip, and so the standard, like I said, is the single piece copper for acetylene, and the standard, if you will, is the 2-piece copper and brass for propane. And so that makes them very, very easy to distinguish and not fuck up and not mix up the two. But rosebuds are easy to confuse from outward appearances. And so this one right here if we can read the part number, is a 8 MFN-1 because it's for the smaller valve body. But this is a propane rosebud, and it has recessed holes on it too, just like all the other propane stuff. This rosebud is extremely I don't know, sketchy, if you will, on acetylene, because the acetylene wants to run back into the rosebud attachment here, and it'll try burning back in this copper tube here. And so what I've done here is I've set this up. This is a shitty Chinesium rosebud, and so I figured for the purpose of science and stuff that we will melt this thing down and see what a sustained flashback looks like in a rosebud. And so I have a check valve here, flashback arrestor here, check valve here, flashback arrestor here, flashback arrestor, flashback, check valve, flashback, flashback, and then more check valves in the more check valves in here. So I'm being as safe with this as I can. But we are going to purposely melt this fucker down and see what she does. And then my acetylene, this one individual acetylene bottle here is almost out of fuel. And so when that is out of fuel and I get switched back over to propane, we will try using propane in a acetylene rosebud and show you that that actually works quite well. This again is acetylene in a propane rosebud, which you don't want to do. Oh. Suppose it helps if you turn the tanks on. So you can see acetylene, nice sooty, nasty flame. Well, there was one right there, but try and get this actually running worth of shit here. So, fuck's sakes. Okay, are we going to be happy for a second? You can see it half-ass works for a minute there, but I want to... Okay, we're half-ass working. Okay, so seems somewhat normal, right? Man, this is harder than I thought. That's what she said. Fuck's sakes. Okay, now, yep, see the sparks coming out? And then it's getting hot as fuck right there. So that is a sustained flashback into the valve body. And you can see it has melted down the torch and, well, melted down the rosebud attachment anyways. Hopefully the torch here will be just fine. And obviously that is not something that you want to have happen, especially if you are not expecting it. Right now, you know, of course it's not so bad because that's what I was trying to do. But valve body looks just fine, but you can see this rosebud attachment's looking a little worse for wear.